in just some of my background research, I know that in early 2020, Goldman formed a developer experience team, and that's been an area that's been under your purview. And so I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your perspective on investing in developer experience and some of the practices that you found impactful throughout that time.
I was actually having this discussion today with an esteemed colleague, more esteemed than I. I was saying, a lot of companies obsess over hiring great engineers, and so the whole focus of the top management is, oh, have we brought in, this person or that person, etc. But then you don't really obsess on the developer productivity too much, or also on their experience on a day to day. By looking at developer productivity as possibly your most important currency there, because developers that are not frustrated, that don't feel they're doing repetitive work, they feel that they can do their best work, are developers that not only are productive but they also stay. In fact, the number one reason for developers to quit and to go somewhere else is when they don't feel they can do their best work. Okay, so and also like having marketable skills. If you obsess over having them learn your own unique Goldman only things, developers at one point are going to think, okay, all this knowledge that I'm accumulating is not going to be marketable, and I'm much better off actually learning something that is universally adopted. And so that is also like a good guide. So we started to kind of work on those themes, and one is adopting standard tools, looking at, is there something out there already, before we build our own? Starting to be serious on open source, really serious to the point of actually open sourcing some of our own technology, like Legend, which is our data modeling and data manipulation framework, is something that we outsourced through FinoS, open source foundation, giving a contribution back to other developers. We started to look at the developer funnel and how much time developers will spend on the most productive part of the developer process, which is you're actually writing code, you're actually committing code, you're actually like coming up with ideas, etc. Rather than, if you spend 90% of your time in your deployment, then there's probably something wrong there. And so try to automate the downstream part as much as you can. We invested in shifting left of some of the best practices. So, for example, security is not an afterthought. It's at the beginning. Like SRE is not an afterthought; it's part of the beginning of the process. Like we have FinOps now. It's another word, which is like you need to think about cost very early in the process, because generally, like especially in a cloud environment, you have metered the usage, and so that generates cost. Risk ops is kind of thinking about risk and compliance early in the process, and so really like trying to educate developers, but also we created a lot of tools to embed those safeties and those controls within the deployment pipeline. So I think those are like some of the things that we've been focusing on. If you let me like kind of extend that, we started to think about how do we translate that to external developers, given that we have more and more clients that are interacting with us through their developers. Realizing for Goldman that developers are actually clients, that was kind of a big mind shift, which I think Goldman was very kind of, and David and others and John really were appreciative of. And so that drove us to kind of start to externalize some of our offerings for developers. So we created Marquee, which is a sort of a set of APIs and tools and best practices, and also like tools for pre-trade and for for analysis, for decision making, and for data analysis and so forth, available through an API and or as a SaaS in a SaaS model, in a software as a service model. And that thinking evolved into what we call the financial cloud, which is essentially not only providing you with the data and some tools that you can kind of manage yourself, but actually providing you with an infrastructure with which you can manage the data. And so you can now, with one click, instantiate a data pipeline, securities master to have your own like consistent view on the symbols and eventually any corporate actions around those. You have a time series database that you can use for your own data or for government data, and you have a series of tools like for visualization and analysis. So we give you like data and infrastructure in a box. And so that's how you start thinking. And if I look at a market opportunity, right now you see this curve. You have two diverging vectors. One is the customers and the developers need, the customers need for data faster and more frequently and more accurate. So there is that. And the other is you need to actually raise your technology capabilities in order to be able to process that. And so that generally doesn't grow as fast. It's hard to evolve the technology. So in the middle, there is a huge opportunity, which is similar to what the cloud was for IT. That not everybody was able to manage, complex infrastructure in an optimal way. And as things got more complex, that created the opportunity for the likes of AWS. And I think as things get more complex on the decision-making data, on the quantistic part of the job, but also in general on the experience for the customers, then this part doesn't grow as fast, and there is a whole market that creates in the middle. That is something that the financial cloud wants to address.